So for every website, it's essential to display images. In our case, we would like to have a big image showing how a typical event in VNGS look like. So we want to create a big element, and in Bulma, our CSS framework we're using, there's an element called hero, and with the option full height, it gives us exactly this. So really big full height image. So let's put that into practice. The first thing we have to do is create a new YAML file, and I want to type it this time from scratch so you can see what every line means and why we do what we do. So we want to define a new node type, and so this is a string, that's why we start like this. And we start first with the package namespace. So this is Vienna.js site, and then we have a double point, and here as a next thing we are defining the name of this specific node type. And just by convention, we are using one of a few options here. We can say here document. As you have seen, we can use here content, constraints, or mixin. In our case, we want to create a content component, and we want to call that hero. And now YAML always works that by separating here two spaces. So let's first save the file so the editor picks up with the format. So to just get all the default options from Neos of how to hide content or time content, we want to inherit from neos.neos content. And you see the Neos base types are created the same way. So this is the package name, and then here we have the object name. Now we want to give a label to the whole object. So the object, let's call it hero image to be very explicit. Oops. And as an icon, we want to use icon picture. We want to give it a position of, let's put it, I don't know, let's put it as first element. So let's start with a very small number. And now we want to have a property, or want to have multiple properties. And what will we need? We need an image, the thing we want to show, and typically, as if you have render an image tag in HTML, you also want to provide some alternative text. So let's create a second property, alternative text, and the image should be the type of a Neos image. So this one is, and you can start by copy pasting it from either the docs or some of the sample node types. It comes from Neos, and it's an image interface. Okay, and this will automatically select the right editor for editing the backend. And what you also want to make sure is that it should reload if the element if it changed. Okay, and as you know, we always have to put these elements into an inspector group. So we need to say inspector group, and here we want to put it in the image group. So this means we have to create an image group. Let's go here and say inspector groups, and here we create a new group which is called image, and it shows the label image, and let's give it also an icon of image. Okay. Next, we have to define the alternative type. Let's just say type string, and we want to show it also in the inspector as alternative text, and we want to put it in the same inspector. So let's say group image. And we know that the rendering is still missing, but let's try it out and see if everything works. Okay. So here with super types we have, oh, of course, yeah. This always is has a name on the left side and then either true or false. The advantage of that is that if you inherit from node types, you can still disable things. So we could, for example, now create another one which we call hero extended, and which would inherit from hero, but then disables the Neos content. This rarely happens, but it's possible. So let's see again. And here we want to create, you see we have a new type, hero image. We can create it. It will give us a render error because we don't have any rendering for it yet. That's fine. We can see there's already an alternative text here. The image is missing, so let's see what did we mistype here. Neos Media Domain Image Interface. Oh, of course, yeah, it just here this needs to be in UI, and we need to have a label. This one as well. All right, and now here on the right side, we can already configure an image, and we have the option to enter alternative text. So now let's build up the rendering. We want to create a new file, and we will save this file into resources, private Fusion content, and then we call it hero, and we give it a file name of hero.fusion. So all the code inside here is Fusion code, and you've noticed there's some similarity to JavaScript, but it's a separate language. So first what we want to define is how a Fusion object looks like. And this is done by defining prototypes. So we are defining a prototype here, and we basically, as a convention, just use the same name we have here. So let's just take this one here. And then we want to inherit from an existing prototype. And for that, we use neos.neos content component. And the cool thing is with this content component, it already gives you all the inline editing out of the box. And now we can define here now props, and then at the bottom we will define a renderer. And we could either write normal Fusion here, but there's a nicer syntax which is called AFX. So let's just say here hello world. And save that. So now let's go into the browser and see if rendering works now. Perfect. So now we have our hello world, and you can see it has a gray background, and this is because we have defined that this is not inline editable, and elements which are not inline editable are grayed out a bit in the backend. So now, of course, we want to show the image. So let's do that. First, we have our image, and we actually don't want to have the image. Instead, we actually want to have the URL or the URI to the image. So let's say source here instead of image. And we want to get not the image interface object. So to convert the resource to just a path, what we want to use here is neos image URI. And this will convert an asset to the image URI. So as an asset, we want to use, and now we're switching from Fusion. Here inside we can add EEL, and in EEL you have seen we can use this flow query node, and let's get the property image. So this will give us the property image, and then use it as an asset to get an actual URI. And now here, what we can do is just say image source props dot source, and as an alternative text we want to have props dot alternative text, and you're familiar with that already. We just say alternative text, and we do the same as above. We get the node, and from the node we get the property alternative text. Let's go back here. And of course, now it doesn't show anything because there's no image defined here. So let's define an image here. you can just drag and drop the image inside here. And now that image is shown. That's cool. As an editor, it's pretty weird if you create a new image and the first thing it shows is nothing. So that's very bad to use. So let's make something better here. If we don't have an image yet, what we would like to show is a placeholder image instead. And there's inside the Neoskeleton, there's an example of how that can look like. So if you go into Fusion Components, there's a component which is called Image URI. And this case statement works pretty similar to how you would, for example, do a switch statement in PHP. It's just, it can do even more. So what we want to do, instead of doing this here, we're going to say neos.fusion. And you can see this one comes from a different package. So there's the neos package, and neos fusion is a separate package which provides elements which are even more basic than neos. And we want to use a case statement. And the way the case statement works is that you define some case. So I can use a random name. For example, here I'm using image. And I want to have a condition. So the image, the normal image, should be used if the asset exists. So we could use this one here. And we can say if there is a asset set here, then this one should be used and otherwise it shouldn't. And to render, so the result of that case statement should be this one here. Okay. And then we want to define another case where we want to use a dummy image. And the idea here is that we want to use the dummy image only if this is not true, which is already the case, because if this happens, it stops here. So it would work like in PHP when you have the break. If this one doesn't match, it would go here. And I only want to show the dummy image if you're in the backend, because in the front end, it would be weird to show a dummy image. So we're checking on the side node. You've already seen that in a video before, if you're in the backend. And if we are in the backend, now we want to render a dummy image. And here I'm just copy pasting this part here. And you can see it uses the resource URI, the one we have used already before. And it just takes the image which comes in the neos package, which is a dummy image. So let's try this out. So here we have our image, same as before, that's great. And here we use the dummy image. So we talked about showing this as a big teaser. So let's go here and we can see that there are some classes which we want to use. So now in our backend, let's add the classes here, and we're going to use the hero class, and we're also giving it a separate class, hero VNSJS hero. And now, because the full height, there's a full height in Bulma, but it doesn't do exactly what we want, because we want to make sure that the image is not stretched or anything, but really just covers the whole thing. So we are going to write our own sus, where we're saying that the element should always have a width of 100 view width, and we want to have a height of 100% view height. Let me just save it. Okay, and also we want to make sure that the object fit is cover. So this will always show cover all edges with the image, and therefore we want to focus it on the center. And similar to our other components, we want to have a margin bottom. Okay, let's see how it looks. Okay, so this works. We have the image here. Let's just, the design doesn't fully work, so we need to here include it. And now let's reload both. Okay, and we have the image here. You can see it's exactly a full height, and down below we have full height with a placeholder image. So that's great. And in the front end, we have this full height image here, and we still have an image here which just doesn't have a source. So what we could do here is tell it to just render if a source exists, and we're just props.source. So now in the front end, there will only be one image rendered. Voila. So you can see the first image here is rendered, and there's no second image because there's no source for that in the front end, and in the back end it would have a source, and so it would exist here. Something you might notice here is that the image is the original image which we uploaded, so it's quite big. And a simple solution would be here now to just define a maximum width, and to just say we definitely don't want to have a picture which has a width more than 1900. And so if we reload that, you now see that instead of linking the original image, the image URI helper created a separate version which scaled down, which is scaled down size. But that works maybe for small images, but for bigger images, we would like to have a responsive image. So it can be quite tedious if you would just do that multiple times for different resources. So we could, of course, create an image once with a size of 320 and then maybe of 600 and so on. That would create a lot of code. And there's a simpler solution for that. Zeitgeist created a package called Kaleidoscope, and they are basically doing the work for you. So if you see the example here, you can either get a dummy image source, or you can then use a real image source. And you just use that image source, and then Kaleidoscope renders the image based on the image source with many different sizing options. We can just define the source sets and the sizes, and everything else is done. So we would go ahead here, and of course, first thing we have to do is we have to install that. So what we want to do is we want to find what versions currently exist. And let's go directly with this version here. So inside our composer, we want to define another dependency, and I'll just define it here, where it's called Zeitgeist Kaleidoscope, and I want to have that in 2.0. And now this package here requires this version. Of course, I have to make sure that this one is really loaded. So I stop my server and run composer update. Okay, and you can see now it just updated some minor package versions, and here it installed Kaleidoscope. So now let's start the server again. And now we are going to use it here. So on the website, it gives you already an example, and we're just going to use this one here. And we need to give it a resource, so you can read here that we need that asset image resource for the image here. And alternatively, we can use this dummy resource here. And we need to change the name of the image resource. All right, and now you can see here we have, of course, without the class is missing, we have here a responsive image, and you can see it defines a default source, and then it defines a source set with multiple different scaled down versions. Okay, so let's again reuse that part here. We want to have that as well. So we'll saying only render that if image resource is actually configured, and we want to define a class, and we want to define an alternative text. And now we can try it in the front end and in the back end. And we see here in the backend, we have one image and we have a placeholder image. And in the front end, we have a hero image here, and the second image is not rendered. So everything works, and we now have a hero component.